Okay, good evening. I'm Liz Smith. I'm the event director with AXPONA, and I'm pleased to welcome you to tonight's webinar, Reviewing on Reviewing. We have an all-star lineup for tonight's discussion, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Thank you to Audio-Technica for sponsoring tonight's webinar. Driven by a passion for listening and grounded in the belief that audio quality should be accessible for all, Audio-Technica has designed countless critically acclaimed headphones, turntables, microphones, and phono cartridges over its 59-year history. Learn more about Audio-Technica and its full range of products at audiotechnica.com. And with that, I have some housekeeping notes to cover. Our talk will last about an hour. We're going to start with some planned questions, and then we will take some questions from the audience. So please submit your questions via the question feature. If you have a question that, if you see a question that was already submitted, you can actually like it by hitting the thumbs up button, and that's going to help me choose questions that are popular for the Q&A session. Okay, so now to introduce our panel. Our moderator tonight is Herb Reichert with Stereophile. We have Steve Gutenberg with the Audiophiliac Daily Show. Maurice Jeffries with Enjoy the Music and Positive Feedback. Nan Pincus with Part-Time Audiophile. And Greg Weaver with the Audio Analyst, Enjoy the Music and Positive Feedback. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Herb.
Hey, hi, my name's Herb Reichert. I write for Stereophile, and it's really funny, the timing on this, I had to kind of rush to turn things in. The 10th is deadline. And like 3 days before deadline, I feel like one of those bugs and you're sticking a needle through it and you're putting them on cardboard, but you haven't euthanized them yet. But I've recovered and I'm glad to be here, and thank you, Liz. I'm looking though, before the start of this, I'm looking at the questions, which I'm embarrassed to say I wrote. Liz asked before, and you know what? I mean, it's an hour. I see this part where it says 7:55, Liz ties it up. It seems like a lot. So what I'm gonna ask everyone to do, I'm gonna get out of the way, is answer just a simple question. To me, I'm really fascinated by how you got started. In my own case, people forced me to. I really needed a job. I've never really written without getting paid. And sometimes that was the only, in the cases, you know, almost everything I've ever written about audio, it was because it was the only job I could get at the time that paid. But, and then there's always the question, oh my God, what makes you qualified? Which I never thought I was qualified. I mean, you know, so what I would like is if it's the first thing, the first question was who or what inspired you to write your first review? And then what are you creating? When you're writing reviews, who do you imagine is reading them? That to me, I can't, when I'm alone, I never know who's actually going to read this. I'm getting a better picture. And I've asked John Adkison once, I said, who reads these things I'm writing? And he said, college educated people in big cities around the world. That's my best answer, but I think it's more people seeking validation, people seeking entertainment, which brings the question that all of us have to answer. How much of this is like entertainment? How much of it is, you know, help? You know, it's a service occupation on some level. But at the end of the day, I never want to be a writer for like Consumer Reports. You know, for me, I'd rather tell a big story than I wrote a review once, and the editor, which was Art Dudley, said, Herb, you forgot to mention the product. And that really did happen. But anyhow, so I'm going to ask you to talk about, in a general way, just how it felt to get started and what you hope for from your reviews. I'm going to start with when we were just getting going, just before everybody came live, I was talking to Nan, and I'm going to, if you don't mind, Nan, would you be kind enough to start?
Certainly. My story and my qualifications should be the shortest here. So that'll work well. No, a lot of what you said resonated with me, where it was like, for me, I've been working in radio on a volunteer context, FM radio. I've always done ham radio for fun. And, I like, and I read reviews of everything. So because I had, always been a spinning records and had that vinyl hunting interest, I'd had this interest in, turntables, and how's the rest of my system going to be? But it was like, it is, and it remains to be, from the standpoint of someone who wants to listen to their music, right? And so I'm very much situated in that position of somebody who wants to listen and is learning to listen. So for me, I got into this just through luck, mostly through writing for this big classical radio station that has a magazine and has all this consumer publication that I was really passionate about, and was been doing that. And so I was like, ooh, I want to write on that. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll try my hand at reviewing too. And so then I've reviewed a few headphones and really enjoyed that. And when I think about who's reading it, that I think is a great question, because there's this, does the reader matter more than the writer, is a question that I consider sometimes, because it's living in their head, right? They're reading a paragraph, they skip a paragraph, they come back, they had a conversation, their emotions changed. And so, yeah, I do think about the reader, and I don't think about the reader as a potential purchaser. I assume the reader isn't going to buy the product, and that they are reading to understand what it was like to listen to the product, I consider it more like travel writing, to know what my journey was like, and to get to experience that a little bit for themselves. And I think it has to, for me at least. For other people, they've got something fantastic to say. They've got a fantastic insight. They know how these things work. Okay, people are going to read them for that. That's not why somebody is going to read anything I wrote. So it better as hell be enjoyable to read. So I try to think about
I'm
that.
sorry to interrupt. Once you identify, okay, you kind of start, this is who I am. This is who I think they are. Now, what do you think, Dan? What do you think they hope for? Why did they come there and make it through? I remember Ken Kessler told me when I first started, like 1992, he said, Herb, just make sure you don't lose them in the middle and you'll do fine. What do you think keeps them interested? What keeps them coming back? What do you think they want from you?
I think it has to be a story, when I'll read an Amazon review that starts out with, I'm trying to homeschool my kids, and I'm just reading and reading and reading to get to buying, a new type of folder for a filing cabinet. So I think there's got to be, it's actually like just principles of storytelling, for me. And so, and I also think, this is bad, but I also think, at least at PTA, we put the price at the end. And I think that keeps them reading till the end, because I think some people do want that information. So I think that's a big advantage to getting the reader to the end of the scroll.
Very good. So Maurice, what do you think? How did you get what sparked the start? And who do you think are your readers? Who do you imagine they are while you're writing?
Absolutely. The start was a bit unusual. It followed actually the death of a close friend, who ended up being a friend of the publisher of Stereo Times, Clement Perry, who a lot of us know. And when Mark passed away, I knew that Mark and Clement were close, but Clement and I had never met. So I sent an email to Clement letting him know, brother, I didn't know whether you knew this or not, but Mark passed away last year, and I explained who I was. Clement and I shared some emails, and a couple of emails later, he said, hey, would you think about writing an audio review? Can I send you a product and take a shot at it? And so that was my introduction to audio reviewing. It had no connection to my love of music or my playing saxophone all my life, or singing in church choirs. or having any technical expertise. It was pure serendipity, pure happenstance.
Can you remember how that felt? That first one?
Seeing your words in print and knowing that people were reading what you wrote was, I think, mildly informative for that first review, but it wasn't really that first review that informed me and caused me to jump up and say, oh, this is really something important that I'm doing here, at least in our small universe. I was actually at AXPONA, it was either 17 or 18, and I had just written a review for an AudioNet product, their $20,000 watt integrated amplifier. I'm an academic by day. That's what pays the bills. And for those of you who have ever spent any time in the academy or familiar with what goes on, there's an old adage in the academy that we spend all of our time writing these highfalutin articles that no one then reads. And I very much felt that way about my work as a reviewer. So I show up at AXPONA. The Watt review had dropped a couple of weeks before the show started. And I walked into the AudioNet, and I think it was probably the audio company suite, the folks from Atlanta and Bill Parrish and all the usual suspects. And in the room were customers of Bill's. And one of them came up and said, "Are you Maurice Jeffrey? I just read your review. I own the product. Oh my gosh, what a great review." And I shared this story with Greg because I was quite stunned for a couple of reasons. One, it was nice to have my work validated by somebody other than a colleague in the profession.
Very cool.
Secondly, it informed me that my relationship to the reader was something much different than I'd originally suspected.
In what way?
My words mattered, both to the manufacturer, to the distributor, and to the reader in terms of informing, in terms of validating their sense of this is a worthwhile product. But because I'm a lawyer by training, I came away with a slightly different impression. My relationship to the reader is almost as a fiduciary. I have to put their interests above mine, and in some respects, almost above the products, and tell them really what I think and feel about a product without being mean or nasty. And I think that sense of responsibility is very much what drives me and how I shape my reviews and how I write my reviews. Hopefully with a nice narrative and an occasional twist of humor at Greg's expense frequently. But yeah, I see my role very much as ethically bound to do what I can to serve the reader.
Now, Greg,
Yeah,
been around a while. I'm going to ask you
couple of weeks.
a harder question. In addition to telling us a little bit how it felt at the start, how about, did you ever write a bad review? And how did that feel?
Wow. Well, okay, briefly, I got started, grew up in a household full of music, not instrumental players, but like turntables and radios. And oddly enough, about the time I was, I don't know, 15, a couple people who were bridge players with my family mentioned their son had opened this stereo store in a city nearby. Well, I took all my paper out money and had an older kid drive me over, bought some stuff, took it home, set it up in my room. One of my buddies heard it and said, "Hey, that's pretty cool. How do I get something like that?" I'm like, "Well, here, take this. I'll go buy something else." So I told it to him. I went back to the store 3-4 weeks later, did it again, came home, son of a gun, somebody else wanted to buy it. So now the third time I walk into the store, the owner's like, "What are you doing?" I told him. He goes, I saw the light bulb go off over his head. He's like, "Take one of these, take one of these." I was selling stereo equipment before I could legally drive a car. And I've been involved with it ever since. And I was a published writer all through high school, doing poetry and short stories and things. But my first review came because I had been working on the sales floor, and I had a Lynn Sondeck LP12, I had a Magnapan Unitrack carbon fiber arm, I had, trying to think, it was a handmade Japanese cartridge anyway. And I took home this Revolver Rebel. Do you remember those, Herb? Yeah, I took one of those home and it sounded okay. And I thought, what if I put a different cartridge on? And I did. and it sounded really good. It sounded very close to my limp. And that's when I started thinking, maybe, just maybe, Harry Pearson isn't the only one who has something to share with people about their experience and how to get the best out of their gear. So I wrote this thing, I think it was 88. I did this review on the Revolver with all that stuff. And I was terrified. I mean, I was like, who's going to read this? And do I know what I'm talking about? I mean, I've been in audio for, God, 15 years. But as far as who I see as my readers and what the relationship is there, hell, it's scary. From my perspective, I guess it depends on what I'm reviewing, because, the last decade or so, I've been playing with hyper audio gear. And my assumption is that people that read those are looking, probably as much of them are looking for validation for their purchase as they are looking for information about it. But I still try to write a little history of the product, a little history of the company itself, how they got to where they are, what makes this particular product different from anything else out there. And the biggest thing I want to try and convey, obviously, besides just how it sounds, is how it conveys music, what the emotional experience is in relationship to this product. Because I've heard some really expensive amplifiers that were soulless. I mean, they had no musical content. They were great test devices, they were great scientific instruments, but they didn't make music. They made sound. And I still don't know who the audience is all the time, because you never know when you write a piece about a $1,000 phono stage, what people want to know about it. But I assume typically at that price range that maybe this is someone who's either just getting started, or maybe taking their first step up, their first jump on that merry-go-round, looking for something. So I try and convey not only how it sounds, but why the things and the decisions the manufacturer made for this product matter, why it means something to the system. And again, Herb, if something doesn't excite me and blow up my skirt and light my fire, it goes back. I just say, this it's not synergy in my system, whatever you want to think. It's just, it doesn't work for me. So I don't know.
No,
Does that make any sense?
that's perfect. And what's funny is so far, we all do struggle a little bit
Oh, yeah.
to know who is actually reading the damn thing. And when I'm writing it, I swear I am trying to see through the page and see those people. Now, Steve, as we all know, besides, having 1,000 years in the business and having worked in a sound by singer for 16 years, he makes videos a lot, almost, 3 or 4 a week, and he gets to see what the people underneath say. But tell me, Steve, do you know who these people are? Can you picture their faces or their age or their gender or what kind of car they might have or any of that?
Well, the thing is, I do meet them. That's the thing. So I meet them all the time. Actually, somebody came up to me on the street the other day and told me how I affect their lives and change their lives.
Wow.
So, but the thing is, I'm going to start with the first part of the question. I thought we were going to start with like, what inspired you to do this?
Yeah.
And clearly it was Harry Pearson. Harry Pearson was by far the most important audio writer of the 70s and into the 80s. And the thing that he could do better than anybody, at least in my opinion, was describe sound with words. I mean, we were all describing sound with words, but he was the William Shakespeare of audio writers. He came up with words. He invented words that heretofore didn't exist, like transparency and soundstage. And when he gave it a word like soundstage was different than stereo imaging. Stereo imaging was a flat line between the left and right speakers, but he talked about depth and space and hearing into the recording. And it was just a thrill. Now, for me, as a reader, I was very excited about that, and it turned me on to high-end audio. But not long after I discovered Harry Pearson, the Absolute Sound, I was working at Sound by Singer. So I was then on the receiving end of people who read reviews, who came into Sound by Singer to listen to or possibly buy the stuff that was described on those pages. So I was like, saw it coming, and then I saw the impact of what Harry Pearson's words made on the people who were reading his words. And that was incredibly exciting. But the thing is, it didn't take long to see that what people thought it was going to sound like versus what it actually sounded like were two different things. Not always, but a lot of the time they were. So that's where it gets interesting, because people have expectations. They read into reviews things that the reviewer never actually said. And when they hear it, sometimes it validates what they read, but sometimes it's in sharp contrast to that. And I think about that. So when I started writing, my writing came from me sitting with literally thousands of people who were in the chair listening to something that they read about, or just people who just came into the store. So when I'm writing, it's always in the back. When I'm making videos now, what people are experiencing is part of the way that I would structure a review. But to round out my answer, I would say the most important thing a reviewer can do of audio or wine or baseball bats is to be fun to read or watch and be entertaining. That's really, we are to different degrees in the entertainment business. It's a very low rung on the showbiz ladder to be a reviewer. And I would say, if you can get them to be interested enough in what you're saying, even more important than the thing you're writing about or making videos about, you're doing a great job. And that's what I'm trying to do.
I'm going to ask you, Steve, to answer the question I saved for last for everybody, which is, what specifically, what kind of information, what kind of feeling, or what kind of connection, what are you hoping to give your readers? When they're done reading, what do they walk away from? It's got to be more than entertainment or a couple of yucks or, oh, wow, that was a great
Really?
time.
Does it really have to be more? Well,
Yeah,
I think the salesman in me, because I did sell hi-fi for a long time, is in some sense, I'm selling the product. If I like it, if I'm enthusiastic about it, I'm selling the product. I make you want it. And that's part of what I'm thinking about when I'm making a review, is making the person on the other side of the screen or page want it, or want to at least experience it, to see if they have the same experience, because that's where I'm coming from, like with Harry Pearson driving customers into the store that I worked at, Sound by Singer. So that's it. I think that answers your question.
And Nan, when you're writing, when they get up and they're done and they've read it and they said, damn, this is a good story, what would you like them to walk away with? What are you trying to convey about the product, for example?
Well, and I was just reading the questions, and I know that's later, but someone mentioned that they got music recommendations from there, because there's a certain type of music you listen to when you're doing hi-fi reviewing, right? Because you want to know how different elements are working, and so it's both a piece really well, but also different pieces that have these, like for example, on mine, a lot of times I'll also do the same piece on 3 different formats. So like a high-res digital recording versus pressing. So I'm just throwing that out there because it's right on my mind, which is that, yes, I love when I read somebody else's review and get a music recommendation. So that's like little candy, like not important, not what we're not reading music journalism, but I think that is a delightful aspect of reading hi-fi reviews, because it's a little different. It's a little different on why that person's listening to that piece of music. And then along with the yucks, which I enjoyed, as what they're walking away with, I guess it would be that they feel, like that they feel empowered to make a decision about what they're going to listen to and how they're going to listen to it. And
Yeah.
so like Greg had mentioned, I think, you know, I certainly am not writing on anything that I didn't enjoy the product, right? It's been a lot of things I've in a very privileged position where there's a lot of things that I hear about, and then I get to pick, you know, one thing and then spend a lot of time with it. And so I do care that they like it, because if they don't, you know, it's like writing about, it's like you know, you're setting somebody up on a date and I'm telling them all these things that I like about this person. And then they're like, oh, I didn't see that at all. Whew, that does feel bad. You know, you're like, I do believe in this complex being, you know? So I guess I want them to fall in love a little bit with the product, assuming I like it, and I wouldn't be writing about it if I didn't. But additionally, I think it's just like that they want to get their hands dirty a little bit, be it in the music or be it in the gear.
Wow, in a million years, I couldn't answer that better myself. That's really, I mean, to empower the reader, you know, first you bring them in and you keep them close, and then when they go away, that they feel somehow empowered as a result of that closeness. Maurice, what do you think? I think you're muted.
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, me and Boris Johnson have trouble mastering these technologies, so I think I'm with everybody now. I want to convey to the reader my excitement about great products. And I more or less agree with what Steve said, that, yeah, we play a salesperson's role. I'm not so much interested in their wanting to actually go and buy the product so much as I'm interested in them going out and getting off their asses and going and listening to great products. There are some reviewers who I sort of skim their work because I know that person and I don't hear things similarly. And so whatever they have to say about a product really doesn't resonate with me, because we have different priorities. We listen differently. We like different things. And so for me, the value of the review is that a reader will look at my reviews, my body of work, and say, you know, I sort of like the same music as this guy. And I like the same food that this guy eats. And when I went to the audio show and heard a system that he recommended, I sort of think I heard the same things. And so if there is a reviewer who you seem to hear like, or whose priorities align with yours, then by all means, go out and listen to products that they write about that interest you. By the same token, a really great reviewer come storyteller like the late Art Dudley, I loved reading Art's articles and reviews on Shindo, single-in tube gear and preamplifiers. Do I have, because of my likes and dislikes, any interest in actually going and listening to Shindo gear? Not really. I don't listen to the right kind of speakers or own the right kind of speakers. But am I interested in sort of an emotional way with his excitement about the product? Absolutely. And so I think that one can tell a great story and enrapture the reader, and yet the reader walks away and, you know, I'm not really interested in going and listening to a refurbished Garrett turntable. I'm a Rega man, but what Art had to say was really exciting, and it does give me something to think about, which is there some value in exploring vintage gear from time to time? So that's sort of my take on the value of what I do, what I try to bring to the table for a reader.
Now, Maurice, don't laugh. And
Yes.
Liz, likewise. Do you know what I did to prepare for tonight? I read an Art Dudley column just to get my mind
funny,
in
Herb.
one place.
It's really funny.
So I understood. Now, Greg, how do you get? How do you? What is the thing? This is, to me, is the question I came here to find out. What are you trying to convey in a review? What does the reader take away? This is a huge question for me.
Well, I really don't know, other than, you know, we do get feedback occasionally. But what I would hope, you know, I typically dive pretty deep into the subjects. I have a strong engineering background. I've been doing this since the 60s, and I've heard a lot of gear. My hope is that in some way I can entertain them enough to communicate the emotional connection that the gear I'm talking about allows me to experience, and hopefully will maybe let them hear it. For people that know me know that I'm not into the gear just because I want to have a lot of gear later. I don't like spending a lot of money. But for me, it's the music. It's the emotional experience, being able to sit in that chair and cry or laugh or be moved or have all the little hairs go up on the back of my neck. And my hope, and I don't know how well I succeed. I mean, every once in a while I get some feedback that says I've done okay. But my hope is to be able to convey the power and the joy of the music that is expressed by having these cute toys that let us pretend that we're in a concert hall or at a venue where the music is. You know, I started very early into the audio sales, like Steve. I had small salons, I had chain stores, I had big salons, but the whole time, my whole point was going to hear music, going to hear live music. And to me, when a system can create that illusion and allow you to suspend the belief that you're hearing an electromechanical system of stuff and you're actually hearing music, that's, like I said, I don't know how often I succeed. I don't know how well it comes across, but if I can convey to people how much a certain piece of gear allows you to get back to music, whatever your musical choices are, and we may not all agree on it, but I want to convey the power of music through the tools.
Good.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And this is the one question I actually will try to answer myself a little bit, partly because I remember John asking me after I had written a bunch of reviews. He goes, "Herb, what are you trying to accomplish?" And I said, I don't really give a shit. People are nice. They say, "Herb, you're a pretty good writer, blah, blah, blah." I said, I don't really care about that. That's not interesting to me. I said, when the smoke clears, if I'm reviewing this little product, let's call it that $1,000 phono stage you mentioned, I want to nail it. I want people to walk away and say, I know what that thing sounds like. When I read Michael Fremer, his taste, I know it. I've sat and listened. I've spent a lot of time. Michael's really good to me. But his taste in what a sound system is supposed to sound like is really different than my own. But when I read his reviews, I know what that cartridge sounds like. I know what it is, partly because I'm familiar. But Steve and I review a lot of fairly popular products. And my goal is that someone is going to go and hear it. They might be totally against me or not like the music I'm writing about or whatever, but they'll go and they'll maybe even buy that product, or they'll hear that product at a friend's house and they'll go, damn, he nailed it. That's really all I'm trying to do sometimes, tell a story that maybe is worth reading for 5 minutes. And then, because, I believe that the value of products ultimately is consensus. And the products that are really good stay in production for, really long periods of time, like the Klipschorn or the Denon DL103. These products have been in the Koetsu. These things have been in production for 40, 50, 60, in the case of the Klipschorn, 70 years. That says something. I would like, readers to understand what this thing might be. Anyhow, Liz, my feeling is that maybe we should let people
Yeah, no, I was gonna say it's a good time for some questions from the audience. So this is kind of a combo question, and I've seen it come up a couple times. So it's, how do you decide what products you're going to review? And then if you get a product that you're going to review and then it turns out that you don't like it or it doesn't sound as good as you expected, how do you handle that? And whoever wants to jump in first.
I kind of touched on it a little bit. So, having been doing this for 35 years, now I'm in a position where I'm allowed to pretty much, I only review what I want to review now, which is nice. But when, and I think we've all talked about this, you hear something at a show or somebody mentions something and you kind of want to try and review it. So you have it sent in. My belief, I think, Herb, you asked me, had I ever written a bad review, right? Or
how it felt when you did.
Yeah.
Really.
Okay. Did you mean, did I write a review that was negative about a product, or how I wrote a review that was pretty bad?
A negative review, because
Yeah.
I mean, I've written them and
Yeah.
it's painful. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, how do you choose a product The only products I've written bad reviews about, someone else chose for me.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not
Well,
more.
and we have that luxury of being able to pick what we want to review. But when something comes into my system, 2 points there. When it comes in here and it just doesn't work with my system, is it my system's fault? I mean, you know, we all hear differently. We all have different priorities, sensibilities, and different biases. So if something doesn't work here, when I enter a review process, I have an agreement with the company that says if for some reason the system just doesn't work in my system, we'll agree to have no review and just send it back. Now, I've written a few negative reviews in the past. I'll be absolutely honest with you, and this may go contrary to a lot of your thoughts. I see no need to waste ink, time, space, whatever, on negative reviews. Okay, for a couple of reasons. One, it could come off like me looking like I'm trying to say I'm smarter than the guys that made it and whatever, and I don't care about that. It could come off as, you know, he just doesn't get it, whatever. But to me, we just don't. There's not enough time in my life, for sure, to spending weeks or month and a half or whatever listening to a product that I feel has no emotional connection, that has no real merit, that has no real value in my system or to my sensibilities. So I just don't waste the time with negative reviews. I know a lot of people feel that's wrong, but and one of the things I've said in public before is, you know, if product XYZ, you've heard about it, some buzz, but you've never seen a review on it, that should tell you something, that nobody's reviewing it because maybe it doesn't sound good to them. You know, there's the lack of a review can be as telling as, especially if the product's got buzz or it's new or it's, you know, it's making the rounds. But I don't know. I don't have time for negative reviews. I just don't have enough time in a day.
Liz, I can't remember the question again. Will you remind me to see if anybody else wants to answer it?
The question was, how do you decide what products to review? And then also if a product comes in that you don't like how it sounds, how do you handle, like, how do you send it back? How do you kind of make that decision?
Liz, I'll take a bite at that question. One of the things I hate about COVID-19 realities is that we haven't been able to attend audio shows. Greg hasn't bought 18-year-old bottles of single malt Scotch whiskey for everybody to share. And we haven't had a chance to share with an aspect of this avocation, this hobby. If you're doing this for a living, this profession, that I think is really important is that face-to-face, person-to-person communications is what creates a sense of community. And we don't have that. So I'm hoping that everybody gets vaccinated sooner rather than later so that we can get back to the audio shows, because for me, audio shows are a great place to hear gear that sounds promising. Now, there's no guarantee, by the way, that what I hear in a 13 by 10 closet space in some obscure hotel in suburban Chicago will sound good in my apartment when I bring it home for a review. But the goal is to identify products that you think are special and that might work in your system, to write about them in show reports. And I'm amazed at the number of manufacturers and distributors who reach out after you send them a copy of your show report where you mention their product, contacting you and say, hey, would you like a review sample? Without you even actually having to ask. So I think that shows are a great place to pick up review samples. And I've been doing this long enough that I can more or less pick or choose what I like to review, although I'm happy if one of my editors calls and says, "Do we need somebody to review this product? It dropped from the other reviewer that had it. Can you do it?" And I'm a team player. I tend to also agree with Greg that I see limited value in publishing a bad review for the reasons that he articulated. If nobody's reviewing a product, it may simply suggest that not enough people think it's worth reviewing. More importantly, I think it's really important, and I sort of communicate this same message to manufacturers and distributors. Dude, if I get your product in and I plug it into my system and there's for some reason that product just doesn't work or sound well in my system, I'm not going to assume that it's the product necessarily. There simply may be a fundamental incompatibility between my system and your gear, so I should just send it back to you. I actually had a couple of years ago an interesting experience with a manufacturer that reached out and was designing what I thought was a pretty pricey Class D amplifier, and they sent me a prototype, and they wanted me to do a review of the prototype, and I had to share with the guy. I said, "Look, I can't review the prototype. I only review, and it's the policy of Positive Feedback, the magazine that he solicited the review for, to review finished product." And I said, and he just insisted, but it's 99% done. And then I had to stress to this guy that, look, you don't want to review from me at this stage. Your product actually technically didn't perform well in my system. There was notable hum and noise in the circuit that was noticeably audible while I was playing music. I have serious concerns about the value of your product. You're asking for money for this product that others are charging for products that appear to be far better engineered. You were just in the gestation stage, and but I felt better doing that than taking the product and then savaging it in the review because the guy just wouldn't take no for an answer. So I tend to agree with Greg that the more diplomatic approach is to let the manufacturer or distributor know, Dave, your product didn't work well in my system. I think I'm going to send it back, and maybe you should find another reviewer whose system may be more compatible than mine was with the product. I think that's the right approach.
Thank you, Maurice.
So I'd like to jump in, actually.
Before you do, I want to just mention one really tiny thing for the people that are out there. At Stereophile, and I doubt people know this, the product is vetted editorially, AKA John or Jim Austin. And once it's submitted, after being vetted, it gets a review. And if it goes to hell in a handbasket, I'm sorry to say, they wave goodbye. I think they make, sometimes I've heard people say, you don't get in the ring. But Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. So generally, yeah, I wouldn't review something I didn't like. But the thing is, for the 18 years that I was at CNET, I was assigned products to review, and I had to review them, and I would write negative reviews. But there were other examples where, basically the main reason not to write a negative review, other than the obvious, is that you wouldn't want to hurt a small company, because most audiophile companies or high-end companies are small companies, and a negative review would hurt them. And I wouldn't want to do that. But if a company was big enough, like let's say Apple or Google, I wouldn't mind writing a negative review. As a matter of fact, I enjoyed writing negative reviews of their products. And like when the first Apple AirPods came out, the true wireless ones, I went to an Apple store, I put them in my ears. I didn't get it. It's really hard to get Apple products to review, even when it's CNET for me. So I just went to an Apple store, I stuck it in my ears, I was playing tunes, I was taking notes, and I went home and I wrote a review about it. And the thing is, I said what I did. I went to this Apple store and I said, what I don't understand is for $250, it's a pretty crappy sounding headphone. A wired headphone like the FiO FH5 is hugely better in every possible way to describe sound quality. And it wasn't a written review, it was a video. And the thing was, that drove so much traffic to my YouTube channel because I was doing a review of something that I wouldn't ordinarily do. And that was really, really interesting. And when I was still at CNET, I reviewed the Apple HomePod or whatever it was called, and the Google Max, which were, basically smart speakers. And I compared them to an actual stereo system with a pair of ELAC speakers and a Denon receiver. And I said, these things are just not, they don't sound good. Now, in terms of what people want from them, and they're going to sell gazillions of them, yes. But in terms of judging them as an audio product compared to a pair of speakers and a receiver, no, it's just a ridiculous comparison. So that was a fun things to do. And I wasn't worried that I was going to impact Apple or Google's bottom line. So I could take the gloves off and do whatever I wanted to them. And it was fun. And the entertainment part of it came through, which was kind of the idea.
Liz, you got another question?
I've got another question. Okay, so this one was emailed prior, and so it said that the biggest untapped market around the globe for personal and mid-priced audio is the Hispanic population. And this is greatly evident in Latin America and also the US. In the case of iFi and Biodynamic, they've created exclusive Spanish language marketing departments and campaigns. Are you guys seeing other companies doing this, or hearing that other companies are prepared to support writers and creators to cater to this market?
I'm going to throw
Well-
that one out there. Anybody got a?
Well, of course, Pedro Diaz has an
Oh, we know.
audiophile, a Spanish language audiophile YouTube channel, and he's catering to that market exclusively. Definitely.
Well, and for journals that have online presences, one way we're dealing with the language issue is you'll pair with a journal. I know, for example, at Positive Feedback, there are affiliate or sister publications, in Poland and France. But I tend to agree with Steve to some extent, which I think we're missing the boat in the sense that I think we should be publishing. I mean, if we're Positive Feedback or enjoy the music, we should be publishing reviews in Spanish. I mean, it's a huge segment of the market. I think potentially domestically and especially in the rest of the Americas. And now I'm not sure what other companies are doing to address that issue. One of the issues that a distributor shared with me recently about the challenges of doing business and getting product to the rest of the Americas is that lots of these countries have very restrictive trade import laws that make it, in other words, they tax imports. So your Rega turntable that costs $3,000 in the US might cost $6,000 in Nicaragua or Panama or Costa Rica because the import tariffs are so high. And so I think one of the reasons why that market has been so elusive is because distributors look at their bottom line and they're like, I don't know how to address the pricing strategy in a way that can make my product competitive with, for example, some local competitors. So I think this is a multifaceted problem that probably needs a whole lot more exploration from multiple perspectives to come up with a strategy to figure out where to go next.
I would agree with that. I think it's clearly an untapped market. I don't know. To the first part of the question, do I know if anybody else is doing it? I have no idea. But I can see where a company like iFi would be poised at the right price point, the right shipment. They're in the right range. But it's been that case forever with publishing. Things that are published in English sometimes get translated depending on. But I suspect, and I don't know, but I would suspect that there are possibilities for, in the Spanish language area for Spanish speaking people to be doing this kind of work, whether they are affiliated with the same kinds of magazines like Stereophile or Absolute Sound or whatever. I don't know. But, I think it's a huge untapped potential. I mean, there's huge portions of the population that want to play music that are probably not getting these kinds of reviews.
Those are really good answers. Thank you. Thank you. Especially Maurice. That was really good, man. I wish we needed to, I didn't even think there was an answer like that. Liz, what do you got?
Okay, next question, shifting gears. Are there any descriptions, phrases, words that you avoid in your reviews when it comes to describing sound? And if so, why?
Wow.
You want the polite answer or the impolitic answer? So I read a review from an extremely well-respected reviewer whose work I like. And I realize that this is partly a perspective difference, but the reviewer was reviewing a product that cost well over $200,000, more than most people in the global make in their lifetimes. And the reviewer did something that I consider, from my perspective, from my philosophical orientation, a no-no. This product sounds so realistic and lifelike and so true to the absolute sound that it's, dare I say, that it's worth every penny of its asking price and is exceptional value. We I think, sometimes use that phrase exceptional value quite a bit, but it's such, I think, a misleading term if we don't qualify what we're really trying to communicate. I think what the reviewer should communicate is, you know, based on other comparable products and based on the quality of sound that it delivers, if you can afford to play in this league, then I think that this product represents good value and a sound investment vis-a-vis other products of its type. But to simply just spout out this unqualified phrase, this is a product of exceptional value, without further explaining what that person means, I mean, they're opening themselves, and I think the industry, up to the criticism that, oh, these people live in a universe where they think that $500,000 speakers represents exceptional value. And so I hate this is an excellent product and represents great value, unless the reviewer is further qualifying and explaining what they mean vis-a-vis that product. Because anybody that says that a $200,000 product is great value, in my estimation, without providing the necessary qualifications, is, I think, doing the readers and themselves a disservice, and opening the industry up to sidewise swipes from critics that we needn't engage in.
I'd like to add to that a pet peeve that comes up, and I think we've all had to do with this. I'll be writing a review, or better yet, reading someone else's review, and it'll say, that was a superb blah, 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 or that sounded better than that, or the sound from that was really great. These words are meaningless, zero. They have no content to them whatsoever. If you can't, as a reviewer, this is a her brand. If you can't speak specifically, in other words, make either a sonic or a visual, find a metaphor, find a way, but communicate how is it better specifically? I can't tell you, even in my own magazine, I see the word, I've gone in with a yellow marker and said, use the word great and superb, gone through the whole stereo file and highlighted it with a yellow marker. And I'm going, it doesn't work. It's hard. It's really, and just as part of this rant, I'd like to encourage people to try to be specific, even if you fail. Liz?
Well, yeah, Herb, that's, Steve was talking about that with Harry Pearson. Harry took a lot of his cues for modifying the language from photography. And I think it makes perfect sense, because there's a similar kind of feel to visualization through photography and hearing. And a lot of his words were created that way. And he was a character, as most of you may know, but he did have a way of giving you a prose description that was fairly succinct and let you understand what he was trying to say. And you're right, the generic, yeah, this sounds great, that means nothing. It means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I will just echo Herb and Maurice I thought that was fascinating. So must buy, which is just a variation on what Maurice said. Anything, when we're talking about, kind of also stemming from the last question about inclusivity, when we're talking about inclusivity, there's the reality of hi-fi and the cost and all of that, but there's still a way to be aware of the fact that many of our readers are not going to buy this product, or it might not be the best decision for them to buy this product. So they should still be able to enjoy and learn from the review.
Absolutely.
What I think. And then, yes, I also think that that's from the linguistic standpoint, it's like, how do we avoid just conflating all these different experiences? And that's the issue with, great or superb, or I have my own, yes, I think I always go towards the same words in my own personal speech and in my writing, even though those are different ones. And as a result, it makes it so that you can't actually categorize, like, I can't categorize my experiences if I'm describing them all the same way. So how the heck is the reader supposed to be able to do that? And so it's like, how do I get off on a farther limb of this, like, this whole experience is like this, and I can say from the distance, it's great. But is there a little bit I could capture that's different than all the others? And that little detail, even though it's missing the big picture on some level, might still be more useful.
Liz, anybody?
Okay, let's do one more question. And there's so many creative questions, it's hard to choose. So I'm going to go with, do you formally communicate and strategize about like the changing demographics of music lovers and in the population when you're writing? I kind of bungled that.
Could you say it one more time?
Yeah, okay, I'll just read it exactly. Do reviewers formally communicate and strategize how to address the changing demographics of the music loving and audio consuming population? So, you know, as we try to bring in more music lovers and audio fans into this group, are you changing how you're writing and how you're reviewing with that in mind? I guess with like maybe like younger.
I don't change. I mean, I'm just an old dog, so I kind of only know the same thing. But I don't normally. I mean, I try to consider based on either the price point or the demographic, the target. Like, you know, I don't do a lot of headphones just because I'm not into headphones. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. It's a completely different experience. But I don't necessarily try to change up what I use to listen to music, you know, the music I evaluate with, in order to cater to a different target audience. I don't know that that would make sense for me because I use reference material, things I've been listening to on zillions of different pieces of gear over a long period of time. I don't try and do anything like that. I apologize. If I should, I don't know.
Liz, let me say something briefly, sort of retweaking the question a bit. Not just from the reviewer's standpoint, but from an institutional standpoint. How do online magazines and print magazines, through their reviewers and reviews and what they do, how should we as an institution be responding to profound shifts in demographics and profound shifts in how people are assessing reviews? So, for example, Steve does something, and Greg has begun to do the same thing that and Herb's been doing this with Jana's assistants over at Stereophile, which is, I think the wave of the future is not in print reviews. I think the wave of the future is audio video reviews through channels like YouTube. That's where you're getting huge numbers of subscribers who can easily access content and access, by the way, whether we intend to do so or not, our lives and how we listen and how we live and how we relate to music and the equipment that brings that music alive in our listening spaces. I think that is an extremely powerful tool. Herb, when I think you took a trip up to Art's house and the little dog was there, and I recall my cousin called me and said, "Man, you have to watch this 30 or 40-minute segment with Art and Herb." And I recall just laughing my behind off for 45 minutes because it was such an engaging experience that was so different texturally from reading a review. And I thought it was in some ways a much more useful way to communicate information. It was more enjoyable, engaging. I think that my opinion is that some of us in this profession have heard that message and are making that migration. I think that others are stuck in the 1990s and don't have a clue as to how things are changing. And I won't mention any institutions by name, but some folks clearly are getting this shift and tapping into it. And some folks are completely tone deaf. And I think they're tone deaf ultimately 5-10 years down the road to their own detriment.
Good. I just have to add a little tiny bit. God bless Jana for that too. Jana Dag, and that's who I went there with. But we had huge dreams of like creating a new kind of audio journalism at that point. But I think just for my own situation, I need readers. Mm-hmm. So I'm like a fisherman. I'm always casting baits. You know, I just reviewed, $30 cartridges, like 7 of them in a shootout. I'll go all over the place, and I do it. It's almost like sitting in a boat, just like, I wonder if there's any fish over there. And you know what? Steve Guttenberg taught me from watching him there's fish everywhere. And I personally think there's probably more DIYers on this planet right this minute than all the audiophiles put together multiplied times 10. And the magazines act like DIYers. No, I don't want to get my hands dirty. You know,
It's funny you mentioned that, Herb. I spent, when I first, let's see, my third or fourth magazine, I worked for Soundstage back in the mid-90s, early mid-90s. And I wrote a column on do-it-yourself stuff called Synergizing for 3 years. And it was one of the most popular columns on that page. And it was, you know, here's a $20 thing to do. You make an interconnect for 20 bucks. And, you know, it's a huge, huge popular thing for zillions of people. And you know, there aren't a lot of people catering to it anymore. I did for about 3 years in the late 90s.
very cool. Huh? Ahead of your curve.
All right, anyone else want to chime in? All right, well then I guess that's all the time we have for tonight. A huge thank you to our panel for taking the time to join us and answer questions and provide some insight into your world. I also want to thank our sponsor, Audio-Technica, for sponsoring tonight's webinar. And finally, thank you to everyone for watching. It's really nice to connect with the audio community right now. I'm planning more webinars for the coming months. And so, you know, check AXPONA.com out for announcements. And have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks,
Good night, everybody. Thanks.
Everybody stay safe.
Stay safe.